capital project management intern for this past term. So here's my agenda. I'll talk a little bit about myself, the projects I've been involved in, some key takeaways, and then thank yous and questions. A little bit about myself. So I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. It's known also as like the gateway to the West. We have the Arch. I've been in it 5 times. Just answer that question. Anyways, I'm currently attending Missouri SMT, pursuing a degree in engineering management with an industrial emphasis. So while I've been there, I've been involved in a lot of campus clubs and like organizations, but 2 are really important to me is my sorority, which I helped found on my campus, or at least locally. It's called Gamma Orlando. So it takes a lot of time and energy, trying to get myself and my peers, out of the classroom. It's not just about your grades. I mean, it is important, but you need to be, I guess, contributing back to your community. You don't want to take them for granted. And then the second one, which is my honor society for my department, it's called ASIM, which is American Society for Engineering Management. And there I've been able to participate in a mentoring program for my peers in my department. So being a senior, I've mentored a couple of different freshmen and like give them tips or like what's the best study tools or what I guess tests are going to look like depending on the teacher, because it's always different. And then there's also the opportunity to go on plant tours, or I got my green belt in quality through this organization. And then finally, one important cool aspect is that if you've been a part of the program or if you sign in later on and you're successful in your field, like a CEO or a manager, a department manager, or something like that, you can actually mentor students who are actively going to school and a part of the organization. So we offer those services, meeting up with somebody who can tell you their experiences, if they're 30, 40 years down the road. So they're like, yeah, this is what I did to become successful. So it's just a good opportunity. And Joe Miner in the bottom corner, mascot. So moving into the projects. So I've been involved in a lot of small projects, but also a few big projects. And just to highlight them here. So I've been involved in GLAD, Hidden Valley Ranch, and then some just overall PSO organization projects. So I'm just going to focus on the highlighted ones. I did a continuous improvement project for my group, the Capital Project Managers, updating our SharePoint site. And then also worked in Reno on their Pluto line, which is the dry Hidden Valley pouch line. And then finally some GLAD projects here and there. So the Capital Project Management SharePoint kind of looks like this. You can see at the top that you have the 5 phases of each project, and we have tools for the Capital Project Managers, but also our engineers on the project and other people we communicate with. So it's really important that we keep those tools updated, or at least current. Some will be floating around like revision 15 or 17 or A or B, so on and so forth. So really communicating with those in my department and then externally to make sure that we have the most updated tools on the site. And that also included creating new tools. So identifying those gaps that we may have and then creating ones. So I'll go into a little bit of that. The first one is the labor forecasting tool that I took from my department manager, Keith Carroll. He wanted a tool that's easier to use. Some background information is that we have this PPM, which is Project and Portfolio Management tool to capitalize and forecast our time on projects. Unfortunately, it's a little bit bulky or difficult to use sometimes. We still have a need for it, but we wanted a quick and easy tool to display to our department manager, hey, how overallocated or underallocated am I right now in the incoming months. So a big part of that for me was just reorganizing the packaging engineering deployment tool. So they had a tool in Excel and they were using it through their department to communicate, and so I reorganized it for the capital project managers so that we could show what we're working on, like the projects, as well as maybe they're not formal projects, but like myself being an intern, having just small projects or intern responsibilities that I have to take care of. So some obstacles we ran into though was when you're reorganizing somebody else's tool to become yours or fitting it to your scope. One big thing is that depending on how complex it is in Excel, you might come into problems with complex reference errors. So going through and fixing those reference errors, as well as making the tool available for our capital project managers, included having to put it on Excel Online, or I guess having an option to access it through Excel Online, and that limits your ability to edit the tool overall because it's a simplified version. But the bonus was, once completing this, we standardize it, and it's just the beginning of standardizing this type of tool for the PSO group. This is kind of a preview, so this is my slide. Interns and school members have it, so. But here on the left, you can see like the project name. If it is in PPM, you can put that project name there. Or for myself, I always like put cost commitment trackers or things I did on a regular basis that weren't just for any individual projects. And then you can put it in a drop-down menu, so like food or project management or lab product, whatever business unit you're working in. And finally, the days calculated how much time it is. And it's supposed to be easy to use because all like the user gets to use is this white space, and then I color coded some of this. But you don't want to be messing with any of the complex formulas because it ends up looking like this for Keith. As you can see, some of my peers didn't really want to fill in July because we actually rolled it out in August. But this kind of shows some of how, I guess, allocated the time is for each of the capital project managers. You'll see it shift over time as people put their actual days in and then reforecast or readjust their schedules. So you'll see this like constant shifting, like red blocks to the right, which just shows, hey, they're maxed out, they're spending a lot of time on whatever projects. And then yellow is kind of like, hey, I'm gonna get happy space. And green is, I can take in some more projects, you know, typically at the end of the year, like, hey, you're closing something out, so. Moving on to the cost commitment trackers that I briefly mentioned. One thing that was a big issue is that these projects can get pretty big or complex. It's just a variety of them. So one thing that we noticed is the tool that we had already available was like basically balancing your checkbook, you know. How often do you use your checkbook? So how complex and messy does it get? Why not make it a semi-automatic tool? Was ultimately what we ended up doing. And that involved several trials and working through some of the kinks for, you know, for each project there's like specific items you might have. You don't want it to be using the macros auto-filled. So you want to kind of consider what the general population wants to use.
Hey, if you're remote, can you please put your phone on mute? Thank you.
So ultimately you end up with this simplified version. I'll go in more depth later, but basically you have an input, so maybe your cost estimate summary or your S&P values, and then you run it, you balance your non-POs and POs, and then you get this pretty little like box that tells you, hey, check for these errors, or this is where your project's at. So it's pretty basic. Moving into, I guess, the Pluto project, which the Dry Hidden Valley Ranch line. The scope there was to purchase and install the equipment so that we could be in-housing a particular set of Dry Hidden Valley Ranch products, and that would save us approximately $2 million per year. And this is all in Reno, but my main contributions were, again, with the cost commitment register, doing that on a weekly basis, and then the validation phase. So back into cost commitment tracker or register. So as I said, you're updating your capital summary, which doesn't change too frequently. It's just when you have a big, maybe a scope change, schedule change, budget change, you'll be seeing that. But basically, on a regular basis, I'd be pulling in live data from SAP and putting it in the sheet, and it gives you just a run of numbers and some, numerical values based on the template you wanted to use, and then running the sheet. And once it runs, it'll tell you, oh, you have to balance the POs and non-POs with just like pretty simple like red dots and like signals that if it's red, you probably want to check it out. Finally, you run it again once you get it all into the right categories where you're spending the money. That's the semi-automatic part. You actually have to go through and rebalance the sheet, and then check for errors and typically post it so your team can use it. Moving on to the validation phase. So I was at Reno for about 2 or 3 weeks during the validation phase. And a big part of this is just tracking production and having those meetings with the plant staff like, hey, we know that we're having these issues and it left our numbers pretty low. What are we going to do to make those up? Because ultimately you do have a business need that you're selling this product, so you have to have a certain amount by the end of the week or so. And then coming up with a plan for what is our more realistic production over the next couple of weeks. And then punch list management, which is, again, it's fairly connected, so you're telling yourself like, hey, the line's running, but what are these things that would make it run better? Or if the line isn't running, which is incident resolution, what do we have to do right now to get it running again? And keeping a good record for that. So here's the punch list. You'll notice that it's organized actually by priority, which is red and high, and then medium and yellow, and green and low. So this is just telling like how soon we have to have this done to meet our requirements. And then on the right side of the sheet is fairly detailed, hey, what we did week to week, what are week to week are the notes, and who's responsible. So again, lessons learned here is just keeping detailed records, because sometimes you think you're trying to resolve the cause and really you're just like solving the symptoms, and so later on down the road it's going to pop back up and you want to make sure you don't just delete it from the sheet. You want to have those notes for later. So talking about the GLAD projects, I was involved with the Pegasus and Pony GLAD projects, and this is just basically implementing new GLAD bag technology to fit the larger strata rollout. And with that, it's product improvement. So it can run pretty expensive. It's over $20 million for the overall budget, and it spans a couple of fiscal years. Here's a basic schedule, but the biggest part that I contributed would be the material handling analysis. Since we don't have a whole lot of historical data, we need to understand where are we at now and what are the bottlenecks for the future. So then we get into engineering based on that, procurement, and installation. So for material handling analysis, I was involved in that whole entire process where we started from just defining the scope of work, bidding it out, and then once we had chosen who we wanted to work, like our contractors or our vendors, we went to the site and actually redefined the scope of work to make sure we're like analyzing this completely and getting their involvement, really, if they have any input. And then we developed a model and we analyzed the model. So the blending model has a whole lot of data in it, and it actually takes a lot of time to go through it once the contractor had developed the model at all, and then we wanted to verify, hey, is this where we're actually running at? And then based on if we verify and we agree, then we make a model that's, here's our goals for the future. So once we reach that part, we actually presented to leadership as well as the operations team, because we want to make sure that this isn't just a temporary model. Like, we're not just making this model for the specific project. We want to be able to continuously be organizing this model or updating the specific numbers in it to reflect future projects or where we're at, and, just identifying again those bottlenecks in the process. So from there, we did a recommendation on what we wanted to do at both Amherst and Rogers, the two plants we're analyzing. So that's where it really gets handed off to engineering. Once we have those basic recommendations and we have the model completed, we're handing that off to engineering so that they can get the details down and actually start with the rest of the process, which is procurement and installation. So key takeaways for me was, first off, learning Clorox and the capital project management right way process, and then coordinating with corporate resources, and then thereafter managing plan expectations. So you can generally start at the beginning of a project and you're saying like, hey, I want to do this, and you think everyone's on the same page, but really turns out the plant's just trying to function, meet their operation expectations, and you're there to implement a new project. So it's, communication is big, and having the tools, as I mentioned, was the one right way tools and processes, and spreading that across your team and making sure that, hey, we're all here to work together to accomplish our our end goal is this project. So again, managing client expectations goes right in with that. So I also had some fun just with the intern adventures. So we went to a couple of different like lunch events, or went to Pratt Industries with the interns decorating the office. As you might notice, I take a lot of like big smiles. It's my selfie face. I can't stop it. You might notice I'm taking most of these. And then, as mentioned earlier, we did a diversity event, so that was fun. Special thanks to the Capital Project Management Group, in particular Pat Maloney, and then Systems and Engineering. So, Cho and Joe, thank you for all your help. And of course, you know, the plant team, so Amherst and Rogers, as well as Reno, you know, can't really do any of this work remotely. You actually have to go and meet with them and get a firmer understanding of what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that helped a lot. And of course, the other interns, school mentors, especially mine, Lauren. And thank you, Larissa and Ann. Any questions? If there are any questions, I believe we're taking a 10-minute break.
Thank you, Doctor.